This is the Meat and Potato Sports Show. Thanks for listening. This is the 9th episode of the show. Essentially, the format of the show is a weekly format where we will recap the best sports stories of the week and keep you up to date on the sports world. For example, in today's show, we're going to cover topics that occurred the week of April 9th, 2018. Alright, we got some pretty cool stuff to cover this week. Got NBA playoffs coming up. Let's jump headfirst right into it, shall we? Okay, first topic. So last week, Ray Lewis had some comments to say about Odell Beckham Jr. He was concerned about the place Odell is in currently, if you will. He feels he's straying off the path of righteousness. In so many words, he feels he's losing his center, if you will, and he's straying away from God in Ray's opinion, or he was, rather. And to Odell's credit, he responded to this, not how, you may normally expect him to, being snarky or passive-aggressive or what have you through social media. He posted a video on social media where he was with his family and he was praying, and he seems to have gotten his stuff mentally together, for now at least, which is pretty cool to see. And he posted a caption along with it, and the caption contained a positive message. And what he said specifically was, quote, "The foundation was installed at birth. We will survive and prevail always, God willing." So in other words, they seem to patch things up, which is nice. But the one side of the story that I thought was a little disappointing for the media's sake, at least, is the media had a negative take on the story, and they were kind of bagging on Ray Lewis for his comments and how he reached out to Odell in the manner he reached out to him. For example, one article I can mention that comes to mind is an article CBS Sports wrote, and CBS Sports kind of took shots at Ray, calling him Wild Ray, which obviously isn't nice, and then, called what Ray was doing a rant, and they just had these criticisms of him that I didn't feel were very fair, because you got an older guy looking out for Odell and his future, which I think is kind of cool for Odell to have a mentor that cares about him that much. And then they kind of did this thing where they put a weird spin on Odell posting a video, the video I referred to earlier, and said that he responded to him with a not so subtle shot, and they called the video a not so subtle shot, which I didn't find it to be that way, and plenty of other people didn't, including I was watching Speak for Yourself on FS1, and they didn't seem to interpret it that way. So, I don't know, I just saw it as the media doing what they do best and trying to sow as much division as they could, which I don't feel is right, especially in a situation like this, where you have an older mentor looking out for a younger player in his future. Moving on, we got Bill Belichick. There was a report Bill Belichick ripped Gronk for using the TB12 method. Fake news or real news? I don't know. I think you'll have to be the judge of that. I can't make up my mind personally. I mean, I'm just a little bit skeptical because we see all these stories coming out of New England. I mean, it's just kind of odd to me. I understand there's a good chance that there's some restlessness, maybe, especially after losing the Super Bowl the way they did. But even with that being said, it's kind of weird that no information ever came out of New England for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden the floodgates are just wide open. And I'm not saying that every story that comes out is fake news or likely to be fake news. What I am saying, though, is that it kind of makes me wonder if, they see so many stories and reports coming out of New England now with division as the crux of the story, and they feel they can kind of get one in the back door, so to speak, whether it's a source that's feeding a reporter a phony story or whatever the case is. And then the other thing I was thinking is, with all these reports coming out, it's very important to have context, especially in a report like this, where it's a quote that's as ambiguous as Belichick ripped Gronk for using TB12 method, and that's a quote from the report. And context is especially important with quotes like that in situations like that. Was he just passing by and kind of gave him a ribbing, like guys do to each other? And which tends to happen in locker rooms. Guys just giving each other a hard time, bagging on each other. So I don't know. It's hard for me to come to a solid analysis on the story when there's no context given. And that's my problem with all the anonymous reports that circulate our news today. A lot of them don't have context. Moving on to another NFL story, we had Robert Kraft, who went and visited Meek Mill in prison, which was, kind of cool. But, obviously you can't help but wonder what his real motives are. Is old Crafty looking to just up his street cred? Or does he genuinely care? Or maybe it's both. Hopefully it's both. I don't know what else to say about this story. I just thought it was pretty shocking and kind of came out of nowhere. Maybe he's trying to regain control of the locker room and build morale. If, say, half these stories coming out of New England are true about all this division and restlessness after losing that Super Bowl, and maybe some other things building up to that. So, who knows? But at any rate, the Kraftmeister definitely had nice things to say about the young man, which was something to the effect of, after meeting with him, he realized what a great guy he is and has no business being locked up in there. So, rock on Kraftmeister. Another NFL story, we got Colin Kaepernick, who is being deposed, or was deposed last week by the NFL for his collusion case. Details didn't come out about that story or anything in particular, but we do know that he was deposed by the NFL, so his case is moving along. Obviously, when we get more updates on that, we'll keep you up to speed. And speaking of Kaepernick, this is as good a time as any to transition into the next topic, which is regarding Eric Reid. So Eric Reid, as many of you or all of you probably know, is a free agent currently, and teams are looking at signing him. One of them happens to be the Cincinnati Bengals. So he had a free agency visit with them, and it was reported that the Bengals spoke exclusively about protesting and kneeling in the course of his visit. Now, there's a couple ways of looking at this, no matter what your opinion is on the kneeling subject. But, I think what's most important is at the end of the day, barring there being any collusion in the NFL, of course, at the end of the day, a team has a right to ask these questions because it obviously will affect their franchise, their locker room, and at the end of the day, maybe their team's record at the end of the season. So, they caught some flack for this, obviously, but I feel like a team and its owner are within their rights to ask these kinds of questions. Maybe they shouldn't have only spoken exclusively about it. They should have asked them other things. Then again, I don't know if that really is the only thing they talked about, and it's possible it was. But either way, they have a right to ask these questions, at least in my opinion, and they deserve an answer, whether it's a yes or a no. I think the worst thing you can do is give a maybe. I mean, it's almost better to say yes and be honest and upfront about it than it would be to give them a maybe. And, the more I think about it, I could be wrong about the latter, the last part. But either way, I feel a team like Cincinnati, even more so, has a right to do so in the market they're in. It's on a major city. Football's probably very important to their economy in that area. I mean, all sports. So I feel it's even more justified to ask these questions because, they're looking at stadium attendance, overall television ratings for their TV deals, and so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, it's very important to their bottom line because it could be argued, and was argued by many, that a large part, or at least at the very least, to be conservative, a portion of the ratings drop last year in the NFL was attributed to kneeling during the national anthem. And that's data taken directly from polls, questionnaires, etc. So best wishes to Eric Reid. Truly hope he finds a nice home for himself at a team this season. Anywho, let's touch on one more NFL story before we change gears to some NBA news. There's quite a bit of NBA news to cover. We got a report that they're saying the Browns are expected to take Josh Allen #1 overall. Is this a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Well, I don't know. It could honestly go either way. he has some serious arm strength. There is no question about that. I mean, the guy has a complete cannon attached to his shoulder. The only thing I'm worried about is his accuracy. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He wasn't crazy accurate in college, so how does that, transfer over to the NFL? I think it's fair to have doubts about how your accuracy will fare in the NFL if it wasn't so hot in the college game. But, maybe with the right quarterback coach or the right relationship, that can be turned around. So that's why I'm saying you can't. It's hard to make a call either way, and that's what makes this whole game of picking quarterback talent so freaking challenging, and why so many people lose their jobs based off of it, and your whole franchise depends on it nowadays in today's NFL. It's rough. The one thing I will say that I like about the Browns taking Josh Allen is he's got that bigger build akin to Sam Darnold. They both have bigger bone structures and just overall builds, bigger builds. So that's good for the weather over there in Cleveland. And, because it's obviously going to be cold there a good portion of the year. So there's a larger premium placed on having a sturdy, bigger build in cities like Cleveland, where it's cold, like I mentioned, because, your muscles get cold, they get tight, and you're more prone to injury, which is every team's worst nightmare for their starting quarterback, let alone their number one overall pick. So at the end of the day, with my feet to the fire, what do I think about it? I don't think it's the worst choice you could make. Well, let's put it this way. I would like to see them take Darnold. I feel like he did an outstanding job at USC, and I really liked what I saw, as did a lot of other people. But with that being said, I definitely like Allen more than Rosen for a number of reasons. The main one being injury, like I mentioned earlier, especially in a city like Cleveland where it's cold. And to be completely frank, I'm just not a fan of all the mouth running he does. He runs his mouth so much, and he's not even in the league yet, and he's trying to get a job at a team, and he's doing that much talking. Just not a fan. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Everyone's entitled to their opinion on it. Mine just happens to be I'm not a fan of it. I don't like it. I tend to like a quieter, more humble prospect heading into the draft. That's just me, So the way I look at that is, you got Josh Rosen's intangibles, which are kind of summed up in what I just described. And then you got Sam Darnold, who's out there on his pro day trying to throw in the rain and eager to throw in the rain and disappointed he wasn't going to throw in the rain and just looking to prove himself as much as possible and keeps to himself. I mean, take the football out of the equation. Say you own a company and you're looking to hire someone. Like I said, take football out of the equation, off the table, and you're just looking at those two personalities, minus the football, don't forget. Who would you take? Who would you hire? Or in other words, the answer to that question is, at the end of the day, kind of how I look at prospects and the NFL draft in general. All right, what do you say we make a major shift here into some fisticuff talk? So there's good news and there's bad news in the world of fisticuffs. Let's start with the good news. The good news is it's becoming more and more apparent that this Mayweather-McGregor round 2, if you will, is becoming more and more of a reality, which is arguably very good news for fight fans of both boxing and the UFC. And we might as well not kid ourselves for Conor McGregor's wallet and Floyd Mayweather's gigantic wallet. I mean, let's seriously think about it. They could easily bring home over $500 million combined if this thing ends up coming to fruition. So, okay, that's the good news and the good side of the story. Now for kind of the bad news. If this bout does happen, there will be amended rules, it looks like. And as a UFC fan and someone who wants to see this thing go down at least as closely to the genuine UFC product as possible, I'm pretty disappointed to see the proposed amended rules. I got them through the Herd. They posted the list. It's about 8 different items that would be a central part of their bout. So we'll post this. Can you get the? Okay, cool. So you guys can take a look at that for yourselves. I'll read them off for audio listeners. The first is no kicks. The second is no takedowns. The third is no elbows. The fourth is no knees. The fifth is no shoes. which is fine. The 6th is clinches will be allowed. The 7th is 5-minute rounds, which is fine. 8 is a 155-pound weight class. So as you can see, the last few really not obviously anything crazy or out of the norm, but I'm really concerned about the first few, the first handful. No shoes, not a problem. But as far as the first, what is that, 4? Yeah, not a fan of that. And it's kind of like it's kind of like a rematch between them, just a boxing rematch between them in an octagon, which it's like, what's the point of that? I mean, if we're gonna do it like this, just have it in the boxing ring again, and then when Conor probably loses, like he should, because he's not a boxer, and that's not been his sport of choice for the last couple decades, we'll all be like, oh, okay, well, that was very fun and entertaining, but, that's what I expected. I don't understand what the point of this is, to have all these rules and make it in the octagon, to make it seem like it's a UFC fight. It's not. It's not even remotely close. So if they're going to have these rules, just have it in a boxing ring, man. I mean, honestly, it's like, okay, fine, put your shoes on and then have this in a boxing ring. Like, does that make them happy? I don't understand. And, I understand, obviously, Floyd Mayweather wants these rules to protect himself, which is perfectly normal, but I think there's also something to be said about Conor stepping into a boxing ring, which isn't his forte or his thing, and he goes in there and abides by Floyd's rules. Turnabout is fair play. There should be a very similar or a close product to the UFC product that we see for this rematch that's on the UFC side. And that's not what we're getting with this. Not even close, if they go ahead with this list of rules that we just mentioned. So once again, those are the proposed amended rules for a Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor rematch. So let's change gears to an NBA topic that I think without question is very interesting and will kind of make you think. So, okay, we got LeBron James, who played in his 82nd game of the season to keep a 10-point game streak going. And then the second facet of the story is you have Russell Westbrook, who got his 20th rebound in the last game of the season, the Grizzlies game. Or I believe was his second to last game of the season. Regardless, it's irrelevant. So he averaged a triple-double as a result for now the second year in a row, which is quite a remarkable accomplishment, right? Now, I'm sure many of you were saying to yourselves, well, what's the problem, EB? Well, how could there be a deeper side to this story, or either side of this story, the two facets? Well, I'll tell you. So after both these things aired, there was a complete polar opposite reaction from the sports media. And the reaction was essentially, LeBron James was awesome. It was the coolest accomplishment in the world, and they're glad that he did it. And then Russell Westbrook caught a ton of flack. You had people like Colin Cowherd calling him the MV me and just bagging on the guy, saying that he steals rebounds from his teammates. And he was in an interview where they questioned him about stealing rebounds from his teammates, to which he responded frustrated, like I'm sure anyone would. And no, that's not to say they don't have a right to ask him that question. It's a valid question when it's circulating in the media that much. But at the same time, I'd find that double standard completely reprehensible from the media, and just shows how much they are in LeBron's pocket. And it gets old really quick. It's not right. Now, in the spirit of true honesty, I don't think that a lot of the sports reporters are quote in his pocket and all that because they're such huge blind fans of him. Granted, there are some, but what I really think it comes down to is, so what drives NBA ratings the most these days? LeBron, right? Any story with LeBron brings them huge numbers. You can see it for yourselves. And I think that they want to keep that relationship with him, and they know that by treating him with kid gloves, they'll be able to do so. They'll feed him more stories, more leaks, and it keeps things turning, right? And now then you have Westbrook, who I think the elitist sports media sees what his accomplishment is so last year. The triple-double's old news. They disavow it, if you will. And, you know, it's not cool. It's not cool right now. That's not hot right now. They don't want to see another triple-double. They don't care. And the MVP ratings, or rankings, if you will, which is voted on by the sports media, really, really personify that. So now that we have the stage set, so to speak, let's dig one layer deeper. Now, the people I'm about to mention, I don't believe the point I just mentioned about being LeBron-sided for scoops and leaks, if you will. I don't believe this applies to them. I believe this applies to them for a reason I'll get into. So let's go ahead with this. Okay, now I want to point something out, a pattern that I noticed, a common thread that's running through all the people that are hating on Westbrook's achievement this season. And that is, that's right, you guessed it, they're all LeBronzies. They all have a weird grown man obsession with LeBron. So I was watching FS1 the other day and throughout the week, and I noticed through each segment, every person that was bagging on Westbrook and so proud of LeBron's achievement I mentioned earlier were all LeBronzies. All of them, everyone. You had Nick Wright, Colin Cowherd, and the worst offender of them all, Shannon Sharp. So okay, now that both stages are set, let's dig one last layer deeper. Why would all these people hate on Westbrook and his huge statistical achievement that he's done 2 years in a row now? What motive could they possibly have? And I'm talking about a motive deeper than just the fact that they're all LeBronzies and blind witnesses to anything LeBron does being the best thing ever since sliced bread. What would that be? Well, in my opinion, what it is that LeBron's claim to fame for his legacy, he's officially had to accept that he will never beat Michael Jordan's 6-0 finals, won't even achieve having 6 finals championships when his career's done. So he's kind of pivoted to statistical achievements, if you will. And I'm not just pointing these things out or saying these things out of the blue. Everyone, even his huge fans, have noticed a huge shift in LeBron's attitude and his feelings towards his stats this season. He's shouted out every statistical achievement he's had from every rooftop imaginable, cheered himself on through social media for everything he's achieved statistically speaking, and so on and so forth. So these statistical achievements now hold more weight and mean more to him and are used as proof for the argument that he's the best player who ever lived. So now put that in a box for a second, and now let's take Russell Westbrook, who's also having amazing statistical achievements, namely having a triple-double average back-to-back seasons. So the fact that Russell Westbrook can have this huge unattainable achievement for many players, almost every player, with the exception of one player years and years ago who I believe averaged a triple-double 2 years in a row. I can't think of his name. It was decades ago, I believe. But the point is, if Russell Westbrook can do this and have these huge statistical achievements, well, it kind of shoots huge shotgun-sized holes in their entire argument for LeBron being the best player in the world and of all time. Because clearly, philosophically speaking, you can't have it both ways. You can't say player A is the best player for these reasons and his stats, and then player B is not, but has more statistical achievements. Like, you can't, it doesn't compute. And now I'm sure I'll have all the LeBronzies coming after me with this segment, but listen, keep in mind, I'm not taking anything away from him, and I still think he's the best player in the league as of now. But I'm not going to be like the LeBronzies out there and rewrite history and the narrative to support the premise of my choosing. Like, for example, one thing that comes to mind is, like, you had Colin Cowherd saying, you know, why do we take the averages in basketball games and not the total in terms of stats? And I'm not bashing Cowherd. I love him. He's probably my favorite sports pundit on TV right now. It's so fascinating to see these people twist themselves into these inexplicable body pretzels to support the premise that they want, when it's obvious that there's a reason why they choose stats over totals Or maybe it's obvious for some, not for many, but in my opinion, they choose stats over totals just because there's 82 games in a season as compared to football, which has 16. So that's why football does total yards and all that, total passes completed out of total passes attempted, and so on and so forth. Whereas basketball does averages because there's 82 games, so your average is what's more important at the end of the day than your total, say, points accumulated over the course of a season. And why the average amount of points that you have throughout a season is so important, because it's an indicator of what kind of points you'll put out in any given game in an 82-game season. And the only reason I bring that up is because I feel like it ties into what I was just speaking about a minute or two ago, and I have a strong feeling the only reason this premise or argument was presented for totals being used is because LeBron happens to have a better total than everyone else, and other people have better averages than him in certain categories or overall categories. And I don't know, I'm not comfortable with that. Not that it matters at all what I'm comfortable with at the end of the day, but I know there are people out there who feel the same way and are either too afraid to say so or just keep it to themselves. All right, now with all that fun out of the way, let's change gears back to the NFL. So as many as you, I'm sure, know that have been following the league, the Dallas Cowboys have been considering and mulling over what they're going to do with Dez Bryant. Some were saying they would get rid of him, release him to free up some cap space because the cap penalty they would receive, even with that, they still free up some cap space. Others were saying Dez Bryant would be forced to renegotiate his contract and take less money because his performance has suffered the last couple years, 2 or 3 years, and so on and so forth. The theories abounded. Well, the decision's been made. It's official. NFL fans, and namely Cowboys fans, were hit with the somewhat saddening news, depending on who you ask, that Dez Bryant was released from the Cowboys last Friday. On a human level, I do feel like this is sad news because, Dez has been with the Cowboys since his career began, and him and Jerry Jones have a very close relationship. He's like a father figure to him, which is always cool to see. But on an NFL competitive level for the Cowboys, I think this is a good move and one they will be glad they did in the long run when it's all said and done. I think it's good to see them recharge the battery or change their battery, so to speak, on this wide receiver core. I think it'll help Dak out a lot, and he'll be more comfortable out there. And anything you can do to make your quarterback more comfortable is always a good thing, right? Well, with all that being said, Dez Bryant, as you probably could guess, wasn't so happy about it. Like I said, I feel bad. It's a shame, but Listen, he could have made changes to his game in the last few years, or because he obviously has come to grips with the fact that his skill level is deteriorating, and people kind of have been trying to tell him for years, but he didn't want to hear it, right? So he could have done something about it, taken the constructive criticism in a better way, and chosen to build off those criticisms and improved his game. Maybe move to the slot next season if he had to, take a pay cut, whatever. But he made clear he wasn't open to taking a pay cut, which I think the Cowboys took as a pretty big red flag, and kind of knew that even if he did end up taking the pay cut, it would be a huge point of contention throughout the whole season, and he would pout about it throughout the season like he kind of did, which just brings down the entire team and team morale, which is something the Cowboys do not need to deal with at all, with the powerful roster they have now and the chance they have to finish near the top or at the top of the NFC this season, granted they make the correct personnel moves and changes. So at the end of the day, listen, I get it. I really do. It's sad he had to leave. You hate to see someone leave after that long and having spent that many years at one team, and it kind of being a family dynamic between the owner and a player. But with that being said, it was the right move for the team, in my opinion, and a move they'll be glad that they made when they look back 5 years from now. The last thing I wanted to touch on in regards to this story is the fact that Dez is like a woman scorned, and he has stated that he wants to play for a team that is in the same division as the Cowboys, so the Redskins, the Giants, the Eagles. So he wants to prove a point, which, hey, more power to him. I totally get his frustration and wanting to get back at the team that cut him, but I don't believe it was personal for them to do so regardless. Let's switch gears back to some NBA. The New York Knicks fired their head coach, Jeff Hornacek, and it's been reported that Jay Wright, the coach for Villanova, the college team, is a very possible replacement. My thoughts on this is, it'd be an interesting change. It's hard to say what he'll do at that level in the current league, but I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens. There's quite some time for them to figure out what they're going to end up doing. So moving on to our next story, I just kind of wanted to touch on something with Lonzo Ball, mainly because his name came up in the sports news last week because the Lakers made a quote regarding him, and also since the season is done, I just kind of wanted to go through and recap how he finished statistically. So the Lakers front office was quoted as saying this summer will be the most important of his life, and they will be working on not changing his shot. So why is that, you wonder? Well, let's kind of go over his numbers and let's see how he finished statistically, and I think that'll shed a lot of light on why they made this quote in the first place. So let's just kind of give a quick rundown of the numbers per basketballreference.com. Thank you for your work, basketballreference.com. It's a very handy reference. So he missed 30 games. Now that the season's done and it's official and all 82 games are in the books, he missed 30 games. So he played 52 games. He made, on average, 3.9 out of 10.8 field goals a game. His field goal percentage was 36%. He made 1.7 out of 5.7 attempted three-pointers per game and 2.2 out of 5.2 two-pointers a game, which left him with an overall two-point percentage of 42% and an overall three-point percentage of 30.5%. He also averaged a 45% free throw percentage, making 0.6 of 1.4 free throws a game. Now, as for the other stats, he finished off with 6.9 rebounds a game, 7.2 assists per game, 1.7 steals per game, 0.8 blocks per game. Oh, and he also averaged 2.6 turnovers per game. And then finally, he finished out at 10.2 points per game. He finished out at 10.2 points per game. So that is the tale of the stats, if you will. So what does all this mean? Well, I think it means, he had a typical above average rookie season. I don't believe, based off what we've seen, he performed up to the level that we were sold he would play at, namely by his father. But with that being said, he had a decent rookie year. Like I said, nowhere near what we were sold on. I don't think he'll be a bust like some do. You know what I think? I think he'll end up being a very solid role player, is honestly what I think. He's not going to be the superstar we were sold he would be, but I think he'll be a very solid player that, almost any team would be happy to have, which is nothing to be ashamed of. So let's not blow things out of proportion one way or the other. I think he'll be an above average player. That's my prediction that I'm fairly comfortable with. Another thing I'll mention is it's kind of funny. I noticed his dad, LeVar, is kind of nowhere to be found. Not sure what's up with that, if that has anything to do with the season he had or what, but he's nowhere to be found in any sports outlet with any of his famous quotes. But at any rate, with all this being said, looking forward, it's safe to say he will have to work on his shot like was stated by the Lakers front office. And his free throw percentage will have to come up, and really most importantly, in my opinion, because I believe with that stuff over time you can improve, with gym time and all that, but looking forward, I think what's really important is strength and conditioning for him, not so much the conditioning, but the strength. He missed over a third of the season, his rookie season, due to injury. That's not enticing to any team in the league, and definitely one of his biggest shortcomings, in my opinion. I think it was maybe a wake-up call for him in the sense that that is something he's going to have to work on and take very seriously. So hopefully he does, and we'll get to see him play for a full season next year. Alrighty then, let's move on to our next and final topic of the day, a topic I saved for last because it's the most fun in my opinion. I wanted to give a look at the NBA 2018 playoff tree and kind of give my predictions on which teams I think will advance to the next round. Let's jump right into it. Oh, and strap your seatbelt. I'm sure one or two of these may surprise you. Okay, so let's start with the West first, top to bottom. A shout out to Basketball Forever and their Facebook page, as that's where we gleaned the playoff bracket picture from. I just like their layout and the way they did it. Okay, first, Houston versus Minnesota. Gotta take Houston here, kind of an obvious choice. Houston is just hot right now. They truly are. Sticking to their team mascot, a rocket, they are ready to launch to the finals, in my opinion. You got James Harden, a very potential MVP candidate. Looks like he's going to run away with it. We shall see. But besides that, you got him and Chris Paul playing great together. Their whole team playing great. So that's, in my opinion, a fairly obvious choice. Moving on to OKC, Utah. I believe this is going to be a great series. Very entertaining. You got Russell Westbrook, who's always fun to watch. Paul George, and then Carmelo, but mostly Russell Westbrook, who's the most fun player to watch in this series, in my opinion. I believe he'll jump off the screen in this series, he'll elevate his game, and he will ultimately catapult them to the next round. Moving on, Portland and New Orleans. I'm going to take New Orleans in this one. I believe Anthony Davis will have a better playoff year than he has in the past. He's maturing more and more as time goes on as a player, and as a result, I believe he will take to heart the criticisms of him in the past that he's nowhere to be found in the playoffs, and he'll step it up this year. Next matchup, we have Golden State against the San Antonio Spurs. I'm going to take the Warriors in this one, which I'm pretty sure everyone is. I know they're wounded and missing Steph Curry, but I don't believe they'll truly need Curry until the later rounds. Now, that's a different discussion, possibly in the later rounds if they're missing him still. But for this first round against San Antonio, without a Kawhi Leonard, I'm really comfortable picking the Golden State Warriors in this matchup. Now, moving on to the East, we have the Toronto Raptors, who are the #1 seed in the East, against the Washington Wizards. I'm going to take Toronto in this one. They're also a fairly hot team, and I just simply believe that Washington is simply overmatched. Lowry and DeRozan are playing really good basketball, and I know that John Wall and Bradley Beal combo is a strong duo to face up against, but at the end of the day, I just believe that the Raptors have too much depth for the Wizards, and they ultimately won't be able to overcome that depth. Okay, now for some fun ones. The next matchup is Cleveland versus the Indiana Pacers. You ready for this one? I got to go out on a limb here, man. I'm going to take the Pacers in this one. I know that's probably not going to be a popular choice. I know LeBron is a warrior come playoff time. Ooh, pardon the pun. Maybe he does want to be a warrior in the future. Either way, I know he is a very formidable foe in the playoffs, but with that being said, man, Indiana's defense, in my opinion, is pretty strong. Quite strong. A lot stronger than people give them credit for. And you got Oladipo, who's a very formidable superstar. I think LeBron's age may catch up with him in the playoffs, just for the fact that, it's easy, not easy, but it's easier to take, essentially your defensive plays off kind of like he did this season and rock the world in offense, which, you can't take away from him. He's very strong offensively this season, but I don't know if he has the stamina to play as strong as he has offensively, as well as on the defensive end as well. Maybe he'll achieve a nice balance between the two, and if he does, that probably will be enough to take them up over the Pacers, but I don't know if that's what will happen. And with that being said, he also has Kevin Love and a bench that possesses a good amount of skill, but with that being said, they don't have the experience or the years in the league and playoffs to kind of substantiate the skill they have, because playoffs are a whole different ball of wax, as everyone knows. So like I said, they have the raw talent. I think their lack of experience in these playoffs will hurt them ultimately. Now, with that being said, I think LeBron does have enough help, which mark my words, if they do happen to lose this, and I predict right, all we're going to hear in the media is he didn't have enough help, which will be very frustrating for me personally, because I had to sit through segment after segment months ago when they made that trade at the end of the trade deadline, and I had to hear how they were a guaranteed NBA Finals team and so on and so forth, and how we needed to watch out for them. So I don't want to hear that, even though I'm sure I will. I know I'm going to, but listen, at the end of the day, I think he does have enough help. Let's not forget how great he is, okay? So he does have plenty of help, so I don't want to hear that if they do happen to lose and get knocked out in this first round. So yeah, if I had to place odds on this matchup, to be quite frank, I know I'm picking the Pacers because I have a gut feeling, a really strong gut feeling, but I would bet that the odds are in Cleveland's favor to win the series 60-40, maybe 70-30, but probably somewhere between 60-40, 70-30, closer to 60-40. But, you know, we'll have to wait and see. I think this will be a really fun series to watch. I really do. If I had to break it down into one segment, what I think will ultimately hurt Cleveland will be their defense when it's all said and done. If they lose this series, I think it'll be how great the Pacers' defense was and how lacking Cleveland's defense was, plus experience on the bench is a huge factor, I feel like, in this series, and I'm not sure Cleveland has it. I don't think this is a popular prediction. I'm sure I'll get flamed for this, but I feel somewhat confident in this. And on top of that, everyone has to have a black horse team in the first round especially. Moving on to the next matchup, we got Philadelphia 76ers and the Miami Heat. I'm going to take Philadelphia in this one. They got a young, very talented roster. You got Ben Simmons, who's really starting to shine, in my opinion, and I believe that it'll completely overmatch the Miami Heat at the end of the day. Granted, Dwayne Wade, has very strong playoff history, and I'm sure he'll play very great, but I just personally don't think it'll be enough. You know, they also have Dragic, who's also solid. I just simply don't think it's going to be enough. The 76ers are very, very impressive this year, in my opinion. The process is finally starting to take hold, in my opinion, and I think we'll see them advance as of now, I'm going to say they're going to advance very close to the finals. I don't know, a part of me even says maybe even the finals, but at the very least, they'll advance a couple rounds. Alright folks, last but not least, the final matchup on the East, we have the Boston Celtics versus the Milwaukee Bucks. This matchup has the most depressing team in the playoffs, in my opinion. That's right, you guessed it, the Boston Celtics. It's such a bummer, man. They're missing Gordon Hayward and then now Kyrie. It's really a shame that they're missing both, because it would have been really fun to see this team play at full strength, you know, with the young talent they have in addition to the players I just mentioned. That would have been a very talented and fun team to watch in this 2018 NBA playoffs, but no dice, we're not going to get it. With that being said, I'm still taking the Boston Celtics to overtake the Milwaukee Bucks in this matchup. Milwaukee will be left behind, the Celtics will win, and we'll see them play in the next round, in my estimation. Giannis Antetokounmpo can only do so much, and even though they're missing Kyrie and Gordon Hayward, they still have plenty of firepower to win this matchup. So that's it. Those are my predictions, set in stone. Make them permanent. Use permanent ink, because I am standing by them firmly, I think. No, I'm just kidding. I am. Okay, folks, that is the end of the show. Thank you for watching as always. Please give the show a like, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out a lot. We appreciate the support as always. Stay tuned for next week's show. We will recap what went on in the first week or so of the NBA playoffs, in the first round of the NBA playoffs, hopefully. You know, depending on which series, if any, are wrapped up already. Please also comment below with your thoughts and feedback on this week's show, as well as what you would like to see included in next week's show. If you have any suggestions or preferences on what you would like to see included in next week's show, include them in a comment as well. Also, as always, please don't be shy. Feel free to send any swing tip questions you have for your golf game, or any other questions you may have about your golf game. Always happy to help, as you probably know by now, hopefully. Alright, we're going to wrap it up officially. Until next week, your favorite host, EB, signing off.